All right, so let me tell you a little bit about the chapters that you're going to read on listening and stopping with Susan Phillips. Number one, she starts out that first chapter with talking about the Abrahamic faiths. So that would be Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, which kind of bothers me a tiny bit. I don't think that Christians actually know that, Christianity is a Jewish sect, one that thought that Jesus was the Messiah, and then it grew from there. So Rome recognized it that way, and there's just a lot of history on that, and I'm not going to go into all of it right now. But so they are intimately tied. So I say Yahweh a lot, and obviously there's some overlap with my Jewish brothers and sisters. Really the difference for me is that Jesus changed everything, and that he is the Messiah. He is the telos, the goal of all that was outlined in the Torah. And so again, that's a topic for another time. But the Islamic part, that one's a little bit problematic for me in that while I recognize there's some overlap there, I would just say that Yahweh is categorically different than how the religion of Islam would think about that. So let's just leave that for what it is and just go on into the listening part. I have to balance me out. I mean, I could be your token conservative at Fuller Seminary, I don't even know. But I do think that the rest of what Phillips does is pretty good, and that she articulates in a touchy-feely sort of way, which is not my strong point, what it looks like to listen to God and how you might do that in the context of individual and community. So just kind of look at that. For me, one of the strengths is that she gets down to brass tacks. It's like she's kind of moving through this touchy-feely stuff, which is good. But then she looks at Bonhoeffer and says that when we listen to God, one of the primary ways we do that is through the Scripture. And so I'm just going to say, yeah, that's how we do it. If we're going to listen to God, I think there is no doubt. I grew up charismatic, so there is this sensitivity to the Spirit that I hear God apart from the Scriptures. There's no doubt about it. So if you have that experience, I want to affirm that. I want you to continue to listen to God in that way. But I always, have like a checkpoint. I listen to God, but I always listen to wise counsel and could check that with the Scriptures. And if those things line up, then I'm good. But the primary way that most people hear God is going to be through Scripture and obedience. So listen to God by just reading the text of the Bible and responsibly interpreting that and obeying what it says. And then on the obedience part, here's what I think Christians have a hard time doing sometimes. You got to remember, the Great Commission, Jesus says, hey, make disciples of all nations, baptize them, immerse them into something, teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. And here's what happens when I sit down with pastors a lot of times. I just say, hey, you're training your congregation, your people to be disciples, and we are to teach them to obey everything that Yeshua, Jesus, commanded. Where's your circle? What's your list? Where's your bullet points? What are you teaching them to do? And so I don't think a lot of people have gone through the hard work of making their circle. What are the obediences? What are the practices? What are the observances that people are to follow? That's discipleship. You do that and you're being a disciple of Jesus. So I've drawn my circle. I know where my circle is. Do you know where your circle is? All right, so that's on the listening part. Now let's move over into Sabbath. Evangelicals, by and large, look at the Sabbath as a break time, a me time. And it's sometimes just like relaxation, but a lot of times it's relaxation with a purpose, and that's to be with the Lord. And so, here I am out in nature, I dig it. So I'm out here, I'm with the Lord. And if that's where you find your, recharging stuff with God, then, that's what you need to be doing. But at the same time, I think what happens in evangelicalism is that rest, we think it's kind of this, optional thing that we're supposed to do. And I would just say it's just completely not optional. Now, how you interpret what the Sabbath looks like for you is, based on your theology. I don't see anywhere in Scripture for me where the Sabbath was changed from the seventh day to the first day. A lot of people make the argument that the first Christians just, they recognize that Jesus rose from the dead on that day, and so to separate themselves from the Jews, then they started doing it on the first day or Sundays. Hey, I'm not going to fight about this one. It's not an issue for me. But I got to tell you something, is that I do think that there is a little bit more in Scripture giving us the directive for the observance of Sabbath, other than just, occasional rest time. I think what we do sometimes is we look at Hebrews 4 and say, well, my rest is in Jesus. Well, that's true, but that rest is found in a practical way in our lives too. And so, I talk about this more in practices of worship, so we'll hit that hard. But for just now, I want you to begin reflecting on it, think about it through Susan Phillips' chapter, and then we'll look at that together, discuss it in the forum post. Okay, so I'll see you over there.